face-to-face time, or you can join a class and do it online and be part of the class, and you have to go through and interact with the other classmates.
That's what happened.
We've got a number of ways for you to take advantage of it, but I promise you, it'll change your life. Check it out at charisbiblecollege.org.
You're listening to AM 1320 WJNJ Jacksonville and FM 103.7 W279AG Atlantic Beach.
You're not wired to have a response to this sound. But when we introduce a new stimulus, save the food. We're helping to stop food waste. Save the food. For tips and recipes, visit savethefood.com. Brought to you by NRDC and the Accurate Science Center.
Turn up the
Real Difference Radio is sponsored by Oakley Family Chiropractic in Massage Green Spa, Mandarin. If you're looking to be healthy and complete, then chiropractic care is a must. Dr. Eric Thompson and his wife Natalie have an amazing wellness practice in the Jacksonville, Argyle area. Call them at 904-772-6522 or go by and visit them at 9526 Argyle Forest Boulevard, Suite B6, right next to Publix. Massage Green Spa at Mandarin is just what you need to relax. Darlene and her team specialize in affordable luxury massages and facials. Welcome walk-ins along with their hundreds of satisfied members. Come to Mandarin next to Whole Foods at 10601 San Jose Boulevard, Suite 212, or call 904-880-0050 and experience pampering at a price you can afford. You have your choice of 12 modalities of massage and the best facials in Jacksonville. 904-880-0050. Call them today. You're listening to Real Difference Radio, conversations that challenge you to change.
No matter what happens, the reason we are having the biggest trouble in moving forward in our lives and becoming the successful people we want to become, no matter what area of life it's in, is because of so much fear. Too positive just because is a direct correlation to 1 John 4:18, which is perfect love cast out all fear.
What's up, everybody? This is the metacognition expert, Grayson Marshall Jr., along with Mr. On the Grind, Chris Allen. And we are joined in the studio tonight by Dr. Adrian Gentry.
Yes, sir.
He is here. And I'm telling you, it's exciting. We actually are missing one of the crew tonight. Mary Rachel still taking care of moms, and we wish them well. Mary Rachel, we got a shout out to you, and can't wait to get you back here. But tonight's gonna be fun. James Christian's in the house, always making sure. So if you'll go to YouTube, go to find me on YouTube. You can watch us live on YouTube right now. Stay here and watch us right here on Facebook Live. This is Real Difference Radio, conversation to challenge you to change. And the topic tonight is how to handle criticism. And I thought about this the other day when I was sitting there, because I literally, here's what happened to me. I got a Facebook message from somebody who just literally blasted me.
Just went off.
I mean, just absolutely told me I was Jim Jones. Told me that I was just lower than dirt. I mean, it was crazy. It was the stuff they were saying. It was just, and mind you, I've only met this person one time in my life. Right. One time in my life, I met this one person. But she was going off, right? And I responded. I didn't react. I responded. Let her say what you need to say, because the idea is you only know me from the one time you met me, or whatever you want to put up. But I thought about this. I said, I want to talk about how to handle criticism. Right. Because when you look at a book called Outwitting the Devil, and I know you read that book, Adrian, I know, but Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, it talks about the 6 top fears. Right. And when he's having it, and for those of you who don't know, Outwitting the Devil is a book by Napoleon Hill. And literally he's having this conversation with the devil himself. Right. And he's compelling the devil to tell him all his tricks. And he's doing that by the way that he engages in conversation with him. Right. So because he comes to him with a vernacular and a plan, it's almost like the devil is unable to not tell him. Right. And so he talks to him about these 6 fears: poverty, was the first one. Criticism was the second one. Loss of loved one, death, old age. And there's one more, forget. So loved one, death, old age. There's one more. But anyway, he talked about criticism. And he talked about how putting people down, demeaning them, is one of the ways he really deals with fear. And so I started thinking about the world we live in today. And it's relevant and prevalent all over. We were talking off air, and y'all know I just say whatever. So we were talking off air before, and the conversation came up about, and I'm going to say it, President Trump. Now, folk call him 45, call him whatever you want to call him, but I'm going to say President Trump because to me, that's what he is. He's the president of the United States. Right. So, but if we're going to talk about criticism, right now, there's probably nobody dealing with more criticism than the president of the United States.
Right.
So let me ask you something. If you were in a position of that magnitude, if you were in a position of that notoriety, how would you handle criticism? Because here's what I have to understand: that when you become an object of conversation, everybody got something to say.
Right.
No, so the more you move forward, the more you desire to become more than you are right now.
Right.
You're going to face that. So let's talk about how would you handle criticism? Mr. Dr. Gentry is here. How would you handle criticism?
I've been in that position before. Right? I was in that position for 4 years, not as a president of the United States,
right.
But you have to find out, first realize who it's coming from. Right? You have to analyze them. I think that's the first part of criticism. Some people, they're not criticizing you constructively, they're criticizing you to tell you that.
Right.
And once you understand their motive, their hearts, then it's able to block out a lot of the noise that you hear. And I find a lot of people, if you don't have a certain security about yourself and understand who you are, what you're good at, and what you're not good at, then criticism seems to go deeper and you internalize more of what people are saying. And I really believe, as we all know, 45 his confidence level, let's say, is so high, I don't even believe it affects him. But the average Joe who doesn't have that type of level of confidence, who's fighting with insecurity, who may be fighting with not feeling they're worth enough, it's definitely going to pull them down and be to their detriment.
Now, I talk about this all the time. I was never enough until, and that's the platform that I speak on. And I talk about it because I dealt with low self-esteem. And I think anybody who deals with, as you said, a low opinion of themselves for whatever reason, criticism is magnified and just overwhelming at times, because I was never a person who didn't believe in myself, but there was still this desire, this need for some sort of approval at some level. Now, as we grow and mature, we realize that that's not as necessary as we've made it become. But it is something that I think we all quietly would love to hear. And I think that's why, as brothers especially, edifying another brother is something that I think is important. Edifying another guy, and we look around, that's a rare thing in a lot of circles. Edifying, lifting somebody up, being actually genuinely excited about somebody else becoming who they want to become. Oh, that's me. Sorry about that. We on the air right now. You get the call back. So I think that's important. But when I look at criticism, watch this. You talked about how it bothers folks. Let's talk about the law of attraction, things of that nature. Is part of the criticism that we embrace or we take in part of the criticism that we put out? Here's the reality. I think, and what I'm getting to is, I believe this criticism thing is part of what we actually put out into the world too, because our inability to love unconditionally makes us, or we find ourselves in a judgment position. Like we talked about the president just now, and most of the commentary that you hear, somebody judging, right? So the word says, "Judge not, let you be judged." So what I find ironic is that we want to always, or we seem to only take half of the responsibility for the conversation we engage in. I was talking to them in Houston today about that, and the thing I wanted them to understand is that we talk about discrimination, bigotry, and racism, and as African Americans, we've experienced it. But my question is, holding us accountable, do we put it out? Or as African Americans at times, can we be discriminatory?
Absolutely.
Can we be bigots at times? You know what I mean? So and understandably, can we be racist? You know, and again, we often disconnect those things because we only seem to have it being connected to what's been noted.
Right.
You know, so it's this apparent super race at the time, whether you go back to Nazi Germany and look at the Jews, or you go back to white supremacy here. And it's only been depicted for the most part in Caucasian African American.
Right.
Greater, less than. Mm-hmm. But I share with them today that once you convince somebody that they're less than, you don't have much work to do anymore.
At all.
So we're literally taking this historical perspective of what transpired years ago. And I'm going to ask you guys, are we still living that way today? Do you think as African Americans in the world today, we're still living defeated and feeling less than?
Absolutely.
Chris?
Absolutely.
We're still living.
Yeah, because I think every day we still living. You know what I'm saying? I think every day we're still living through the eyes of someone else.
Okay.
No matter what you do. You go to a job interview, you still looked at through the eyes of someone else. And so we, you know, as a kid, we've always been told, you know, you got to do better than. You can't just do what they do. You got to be better than. Right. So I think when you live in a society where you're always going to be looked at through someone else's eyes, I think that is a struggle that we always have to deal with.
So let me ask you this. If it's something that we're still dealing with, is it a real issue, or are we making it a continual issue? You know what I'm saying? Is it watch this, is it something that we hold on to because it still happens?
Yes.
Or is it something we're holding on to because we want it to continue to happen?
I think it's something that we hold on to because it happened, right?
Okay.
I think it's something that's been ingrained into us for so long that it's hard to release it.
Sure.
There's a book by Booker T. Washington, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but he talks about slavery being a curse on both African Americans and Caucasians. One, because it made Caucasians believe that they were a master race and they were above us, and it made African Americans believe that we were below them. And we've maintained that same mindset for years on end. So there's no one better than anyone. We can definitely understand that. But it's created an insecurity on one side, and it's created a super ego on the other side. So both are operating in irrational principles from the beginning.
So when we talk about it that way, and answer me this: are there Caucasian people that think they're less than?
Absolutely.
So where do they fit in? If we're talking about, because it's not just minorities, right? So if we're talking about it in its totality, what are they classified as? Because watch this, and here's what I believe. To me, when I see the white supremacist mindset, it to me resonates people that are or think they're less than, who have to use that as a lifting up tool because of their features. So is it really are we really dealing with a racial issue, or are we dealing with an insecurity, insufficiency issue? Because at the end of the day, if they thought that here's my thing. If I really thought I was better, I ain't got to tell you.
Absolutely.
If I really thought I was better, why I got to protest? If that's what I really believe, then why I got to do all this? So the fact of the matter is, I really don't believe it. So what I'm doing is my own insecurities. Because when they talk about life, it's usually the fear. I heard this, I think I saw something on YouTube the other day about, and their commentary was, they're taking our stuff. Right. You know what I'm saying? It was, so again, I went back to what's the bigger picture. The bigger picture was about fear. And that's what it came down to. So
I don't know. I want to jump in. I don't know, because I think I saw that same comment. I don't know, when I looked at it, heard it, I didn't see it coming from a place of fear, but more so a place of entitlement. Okay. Because they are of a different race, they were expected to say, listen, because I am this color, that job that you got, I'm supposed to have that job. Just not be based upon my performance or I've done something better than you, but just for the mere fact that I'm this color, and you got it, therefore you're taking my spot. It came from a place of entitlement versus a place of fear. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, that's fair. I would contend though that when you tell me that you're taking my stuff, Your fear, because here's the deal: if you watch this, if I'm it, if I'm the it, right, and I got it all, if I'm the it and I got it all, I ain't worried about what you take. Right. If I'm truly it, right. You know what I'm saying? So, but I get where I get it, because I think because racism is a belief, right? So it is an entitled place. But and here's what here's what I want people to look at, and us to sit here and discuss some more. I still contend that when you shuffle it all back, when you peel back the onion, when you look at it is for what it is, it still comes down to faith versus fear. Absolutely. I think that everything that we can continue, and this is what makes the world the way that it is. Right. I think we don't want to reduce it to the simplest form. And math, come on, y'all. Isn't that what you had to do to your math problem, James? That's what you had to do. You had to reduce it to the lowest form. No matter what, they always had you breaking it down to the lowest form. Right. What does Shimon say? It's culture, not race. We're of the human race, not better race, just different cultures. I get it. Well, and I get that. Right. and that sounds wonderful. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, everybody doesn't react to it that way. And I think we have to get people looking at why it's that way. One of the ladies on radio today was talking about this. She said she was dealing with some upset and frustrated Caucasian folks. And she said, my only question was, why are they so mad? It was really and for me, it's about getting to the root of the problem. Right. You know, so we're talking about how to handle criticism. I think you talked about it, what type and who it's coming from, but understanding truthfully, what are they criticizing? Right. I think for me, that's what it comes down with. What are you actually because I can only allow you to criticize something I'm not okay with. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I've got to not be okay with it for your criticism to even have any value, have any merit. Right. So when I look at how I handle that, again, the biggest thing is, who am I? And I think we're living in a world of people, unfortunately, that really don't know who they are. Right. Absolutely. They struggle with that. Because I know for me, and I've shared this about self-esteem, it is a mother to deal with sometimes. Absolutely. Because we're taught and trained. We're talking about Booker T. Washington. Carter G. Woodson did a book as well, and he said the miseducation of the African American. Right. And it really is not knowing who we really are. Absolutely. I've said, you know, and I say this when I speak, and one of the things that's important that I share with people is this. I said, if you were, okay, we in 2017, right? Who got the juice in 2017? If I asked you for 10 superstars, megastars, entertainers, who got the juice? Oprah. Give me 10. Oprah got the juice. Who else? LeBron got the juice. Who else got the juice? Jay-Z. Jay-Z got the juice. Who else got the juice? Puff got the juice. Who else got the juice in 2017?
Man, I don't watch much TV.
Oh, your boy, the guy who makes all the movies, Tyler Perry.
And I would tend to say, from an historical place, I would say if your name is Kennedy, you got juice. Absolutely. Okay. I would say if your name is Obama right now, you got juice. Right. I would say if your name is Kardashian, you got juice. You got juice, right? Absolutely. So watch this. If you were a child, relative, or related to any one of them, you got juice. With free access to their status. Right. How you walk in the face of them?
You already stepping high.
Okay.
Head back.
That goes up. Right. But you probably have an entitled attitude. Right. Right. Absolutely. Because you got resources. Because you got, now, we just named 7 African Americans. Right. And I named Kennedy. I threw Kennedy, and then I threw Rockefeller. I didn't throw Rockefeller. Let's throw Rockefeller. Right. So, depending on who you are, if you have that status, then you walk a certain way. Right. My father's earthly name was Grayson B. Marshall Sr. And he had a little bit. Right. He ain't got what that dude got. Right. So we'll walk when we. It's so funny. I asked y'all who had the juice in 2017. None of y'all say God.
Because he had it in 2016.
No, but watch it. But watch. Here's my point, though. We talk about earthly. We talk about absolutely right here. So the reality of it is that and here's what we could all say: we ain't related to them. Right. So we can look and say they got the juice. And if we were related to them, everything might be a little bit different. But we are related to God. And I guarantee you, if we had this conversation when people say, who got the juice in 2017? It would take some real deep spiritual person. You say God got the juice. Because that's not the way we look. And I think that has a lot to do with our inability to really grab who we are. Because if that's your true lineage, if that's your true heritage, that should be the first thing we talk about. And it's not. And so I think it allows for criticism because the judgment of the natural is way more than the ability of the supernatural. So when we look at how we handle criticism, I think one of the ways you handle criticism is really understanding who your birthright is. See, you can't mess with me if that's come on, y'all. If y'all had a big brother in the neighborhood who just had that rep, they want to mess with you, but if they know you related, they be like, go ahead, shorty, you all right.
You're good.
Hey, you good. And everybody looking at how y'all let him go. Y'all don't know who you know. Y'all don't know who he with. You know what I mean? And I think that's somewhere we have to get people in a mindset of, do you really know who you with? And I think that's something that we have to take as this message into the world. Adrian, you're doing it with finances. You're doing it with Forex. You're talking to people about trading money. You're talking to people about increasing their monetary and financial IQ, right? That is, here's the deal. We probably struggle with money more than anybody in the world. And it's lack of education in those areas. But you, I know, take criticism for making the attempt to teach folks how to handle money, how to invest money. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and what's crazy is that when you making the effort to do something, to grow people, to change them, to improve their lives, all of a sudden, here comes a criticism. And it comes a criticism because they don't value the heritage. If you came from a banking family and your family owned 20 banks, and that was where your pedigree came from, there'd be less criticism. Because they're going to look at your heritage, your birthright, and say, oh, you know what he's talking about. He came from much. They came from it. Well, again, let's look at where we come from. And but because we don't stand on that, because we don't hold that in front of folks and really walk into it, we're going to embrace we're going to necessarily embrace. I got to charge it. Is that iPhone 7? Yeah. Y'all know we on radio. Hold on. I got to get a charge.
But real, before you, I know you jumped on some other stuff.
I'm getting a charge. That's all.
Oh, okay. We was talking about real quick. I want to just jump back on that thing when we talk about fear, versus the faith. You know, we operate on the faith because we believe that things are panning out the way that God has for it to be. Right. That's where the faith comes in. But operating out of fear, with some folk, and wasn't too long ago, just by the color of your skin, you was already a step ahead. You know, there was a time not too long ago where if you was of a different skin tone, you sat in somebody's seat, you got to get up. You know what I'm saying? That's not too long ago. We're not too far out from that. So that fear is operating like, man, we're no longer operating just on the color of my skin alone. Now some things have got to be put in place as well.
Absolutely. No question. And there's no one that will ever deny that.
Right.
Here's my question though. How long do we hold that as an excuse? How long do we hold that as a handicap?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I think that's where we have to get to, because moving forward in entrepreneurial ventures, moving forward in thinking differently and doing different things, some folks won't do it because of criticism. They won't do it. We've all been in direct selling before.
Right.
My goodness, you get criticized like crazy for getting direct selling.
Right.
Most of them are marketing. And the folk criticizing don't know really what the heck they're talking about. So I think a lot of it has to do with in what space the criticism's in, because it seems that criticism only comes when you're trying to advance.
Well, to move forward, for change to ever happen, there needs to be criticism.
Right.
There needs to be some sort of pushback and resistance towards moving forward.
Right.
Look at Proverbs, 1 Timothy, it says, we were not given the spirit of fear.
The power of love and a sound mind.
Absolutely. And I thought we really don't embrace that enough. Like Grayson was saying, Coach was saying, we have a birthright that we haven't really stood up to. We have a birthright that we haven't embraced in our lives. And I had a motivational call this afternoon, and that's what I talked about. It's already inside of us, but we haven't figured out, we're wealthy. We're supposed to live in a wealthy place. And we can't handle criticism because we don't understand the promises that were already placed on our lives now. We've embraced what everyone else has said in the negative, right? And it's completely torn us down. That's why we fight with the low self-esteem, right? Because we've never embraced the God in us. Right. That's why we deal with the frustration and the aggravation in today's world, and we're afraid what the next man may say. Right? We weren't born with fear.
Correct.
I think you was telling me, Coach, what are the fears that a child has, baby has?
The fear of the phone and the fear of loud noise.
That's
those are the only natural fears you have. Every other fear was learned.
Right.
And that's what, and again, we're back to, it's so funny how we keep getting back to the same foundation and the same problem that we have to fix.
Right.
When success comes with criticism, and when you know who you are, that doesn't faze you. It's almost an expected part of what you are. Let's understand this: Jesus was criticized by the learned and most knowledgeable people of his time.
Right. Absolutely.
You're talking about the Pharisees. And he told them straightforward. He says, you search the scripture, and then you think you have eternal life. But the scriptures testify to me, but you won't come to me that you might have life. Right. Here he was. Watch this. He ain't doing nothing to nobody. And he getting criticized.
Right, right.
So we're talking about how to handle criticism. If you're going to be anything in life, you should expect it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I think it's easier to handle if you know what's coming.
Right.
And I think most of us don't expect it to come, and when it comes, it's a shock. If I know it's coming and I'm expecting it to come, I'm not taken aback by it. This is the way it's supposed to be. It's part of me growing to become who I am.
Right. It's almost like you almost have to check yourself as well, because sometimes when folks criticize you, if there's a seed of that same doubt that's already inside of you, it's going to resonate a lot more. You know what I'm saying? And you'll begin to buy into whatever they're criticizing you about. Why? Because you already believe it yourself.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? I think that's one of the things we talk about President Trump, is that I totally believe that he don't think that he is saying absolutely nothing wrong. So when the criticism comes, he able to look you dead in your face and be like, no, you're wrong. Why? Because there's no doubt in him that what you're saying has any relevancy or truth to it.
And he's going to do that. And I think that comes from what he came from prior to being the president. Right. Coming from a lineage of wealth, right? Coming from a lineage of afforded life, right? And that's the way it is. But handling criticism, Job in the Bible had to learn how to handle criticism. Right. I mean, he was the dude. So if we'd have said who got the juice back then, Job would have been the dude, right? Job had the juice. He had the money, he had the family, he had everything, he had the prestige, and he had the righteousness. And literally, he had to deal with this. And it came face to face with him. He said, the thing that I fear most has come upon me. The thing that he looked at, the one thing that he was so concerned about was losing his family. So now he goes out, everything that he had is gone. And his friends look at him and begin to criticize him. Wife even told him, why don't you just cuss God and die? You know what I mean? That's the mindset that was there. The one thing he never did was charge God foolishly and never lost faith. So I think with us, it's easy to accept criticism and handle criticism if my faith is intact.
Oh, that's good.
If it's as sound as it needs to be, then I literally can walk this earth with it. Now, I'm gonna tell you something. I don't care what it looks like to some folk. It's still a struggle. It's still a struggle because I find myself personally, it's hard sometimes taking criticism. Not that you don't want to grow, but you talk about Adrian, it's who it comes from sometimes. And when it's somebody close to you that's constructively going through and that trust is there, it's not a problem. But when people that are close to you, that you may have had a challenge with, they might have had a challenge with you, but when they begin to criticize, it's almost like, man, they don't even really know me. You know what I mean? And they're basing on an experience, something happened, and that stuff messes with your heart, right? You know, and so the reality of it is that's where this whole topic came from, how to handle that thing, because you truly have to be like David and encourage yourself, right? At that time, because the heaviness of lack of approval is, and that's why I believe that God's love is the way it is. We talk about agape, unconditional love. I think that's why we have to operate there, because when there's conditions, there's criticism. And I think if we want to really begin to model something different for people, it's got to be that. And I think we got to handle criticism that way. We have to expect it, like Adrian talked about, but I think it's understanding who it's coming from, the source it's coming from, and what it's doing. Here's the other side of criticism. You talked about it, Chris. You have to check yourself, because sometimes when they're saying stuff, even though it's critical, it may be something you need to check. And I think that's part of it too. So handling it with an open heart, right, and receiving it. I think handling criticism has everything to do with how you are maturing personally.
Right.
Because when it causes you to react and not respond, we can still say we're in that immaturity place.
That's good.
Because immaturity says I react. Maturity says I respond.
Right.
So it's growing from it. Even as an ex-athlete, you go in the film room and coaches will break down everything you did. Well, because I wanted to be better at sports, I never listened to it as derogatory.
Right.
I always listened to it as improvement.
Right.
Because it was either for the team, it was for me. Something was a part of that exchange that I felt if I kept doing this, it was going to be better for us.
Right.
I need to learn what I'm doing wrong. And I think that if we begin to take that as the foundational reason that we are moving forward and doing the things we're doing, then it changes us. I mean, I told you on the radio, we're talking about Charlottesville today, right? The Charlottesville incident was crazy. And it's been blown to, I mean, my God, right? Now, somebody lost their life, that's not okay. Right? Dude went through and injured some more folks, not okay. Right? But I believe that not meeting anger with anger is only gonna get more angry.
Absolutely.
That's just the way and what amazes me, you talk about it being biblical, but I tend to wonder why people constantly get surprised when that kind of stuff happens. What would happen, do you think, Adrian, if them jokers came out there with them tiki torches from Turner Ace Hardware, and instead of somebody get mad at them, folk went out and just hug?
It diffuses the situation.
You know what I'm saying? Just ignore them jokers. You know what I mean?
I don't know around that hook yet.
I'm
Diffuse the situation.
But I'm saying if you don't, the Bible talks about the soft whisper turning away wrath. Right. It talks about those things. And what's funny is that we expect something else to resolve and fix that, right? As opposed to it's funny, we rarely ever try what the word says. Right. No. We rarely ever try what the word says. No. But I'm just wondering, I mean, if you can love people through some stuff, I know good and well I run into some less than favorable folk in my day and time.
Absolutely.
I know I have.
Okay.
And I believe that it's kind of hard to be mad at somebody that's being nice.
That's being nice. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's just, now you can do it. I'm not saying you can't, but that's a hard thing to do with somebody going out of their way to be nice to you. After a while, you got to look at you and say, you know what?
I got a problem.
Okay, something wrong with me. You know what I mean? It's on me. And that's what I think that for me, I think that's what Jesus did. Right? They criticized him, he wouldn't heal somebody else. Right? They criticized him, he wouldn't love on somebody else. Right? They criticized him, he kept doing something good. The more you focus on or say that I'm doing bad, I'm just gonna keep doing good. Right? And I think that's another way to handle criticism. When folks are pointing out or focusing on what you do bad, just turn around and do something good.
Right. And I begin to take on this stance. First of all, criticism is nothing but judgment. Right. And I realize the only way you can be judgmental is if you're not completely honest with who you are in the first place. Right. So I've established that in my mind. Because the most judgmental people always tend to be the people who have the most problems, who are the most insecure. Right. They can find everything.
Say that again. Please say that again.
The most judgmental people always tend to be the people who have the most problems, the most insecurities, right? And they're literally searching for people and problems in other people so they can make themselves feel better about who they are. T.S. Eliot once said, half the harm in this world was done by people trying to make themselves feel important, right? So we have to always establish that in our minds when we're looking at who's criticizing us, right? How critical are they? Are they critical about everyone? One, right? Are they constantly talking about everybody? Everybody knows what the Bible says about gossip. They're constantly gossiping. Guess what? that spirit is upon them.
Right.
You have to look at was the spirit of Jezebel. Spirit of Jezebel was intimidation, manipulation, and control, and that is prevalent in our day and time now. That's what judgment is based off of. So if we can understand the spirit of the person that's coming from, like identify how critical they are in life around everybody, then we'll start seeing a pattern. Like, this is not criticism. This is to make them feel better.
Right. And so let's go there. Spirit of Jezebel. How would you handle somebody with the spirit of Jezebel?
We can only handle it with we're gonna get first we're gonna go spiritual. We have to utilize the fruits of the spirit, right? But at the same time, my spirit ain't gonna tell me to do that, right? In that time. But the only way you can handle is either disconnect from them, or you can love them through it. And that's what we were told to do in the Bible from the beginning.
Right.
And like you said, that can diffuse the situation. Right. We can diffuse many of the situations that we go through. It says Proverbs, evil never leaves the house of the person who does evil for good.
Right.
Right. So it's never anything going to come out of an evil situation. So you battling me, we both critical, Charlottesville, you're trying to fight them because of what they're doing. Well, evil will never leave the house.
Correct.
So we have to begin to release that evil by showing love, agape, like you talk about.
And I told him, I was talking to him on radio today, and I said, here's what folks need to understand, that there was a skit that I read, or there was an exchange in a classroom, and the discussion was about certain elements of life. And so the question was posed, is there such thing as cold? And the professor responded, well, of course there's cold. And the young person responded, well, no, there isn't. He said, because cold is just the absence of heat. He says, you can't measure cold. He said, but you can measure heat. He said, so cold is the absence of heat. He said, okay. He said, so is there such thing as darkness? He said, of course there's darkness. He said, well, no. He said, because darkness is the absence of light. He said, because if it's dark, you turn the light on, there's no more darkness. He said, so when we talk about the things of God, he said, is there good and evil? He said, is there evil? And he says, well, no, sir. He said, evil is the absence of good. Because if everybody is good, where can evil be? Right. You know what I'm saying? So we have to understand that there's nothing to criticize. Thanks, Mike. What we have to understand is that the evil that exists is the absence of good. That's all. So we have to do a better job of exercising and modeling good. That's why we talk about it's got to be on us, because it is we live these lives and we go and face stuff, right? But at the end of the day, if we want to be good and do good to people, what is that feeling like? Right. Absolutely. When you go and you engage in doing something good, it's unbelievable. Absolutely. Right? So why can't that be the entire way that we live every single day of our lives? You know what I mean? It could be, and it should be something, but again, here's what happens. Even someone who strives to do that is going to be.
What if it's criticism?
It's crazy.
But he always good.
It's almost so it's almost like this element of criticism, and in reality, it talks about again, and outwitting the devil is one of the top fears that the enemy uses. It's criticism. And it's almost like it's going to hinder and halt us, because it seems like whatever aspect we're in, it's going to face criticism. You do too good, it's going to face criticism. You do bad, it's going to face criticism. So it's almost a tool to keep you from moving forward. Absolutely. To keep you from becoming exactly. And so stagnant will tend to make you comfortable. Comfort, again, is the antithesis of progression and where we're supposed to be. So what we find is that we tend to become redundant and retarded in the things in me. And I'm not talking about special. I'm talking about the lack of being able to move in this whole thing. And that's what I see when I look at the media, when I look at all these things. The fact that we portray and highlight and focus on criticism, it keeps us from moving, because now nobody wants to do anything but deal with that problem. And here's reality: whatever you think about, you bring about. it's what we're talking about. So nobody's moving forward. Everybody wants to just talk about this. It's amazing where criticism will hold you. This is all we get to talk about. Well, and there's no resolution to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was the entire plan of the devil from the beginning. Like, he understands you have purpose. He understands that you're destined for greatness, and he wants to snuff that out. So as long as I can keep you in a place of fear, if I can longer keep you in a place of activation, fear, like scared to move forward, then I have to have, like, you can't go out and touch the world if you sit back in the house scared. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, it's funny. I'm just looking at this. Lynn just hit me up. She says, so crazy. This is the topic. Has part to do with why I wanted to talk to you about earlier. Just we're going live. Knowing I'm at least on the right path helps me continue tackling what comes. I'm growing more and more. And then Dr. Regina, Tyree up in Hazelhurst, Georgia. Hazelhurst in the house. Too positive just because. Heard that somewhere. Thanks for your positivity in such a negative world. You know, it's, and even this conversation is going to be criticized, because we're talking about stuff, but this is a conversation that challenges you to change. I've learned, and I've made it a point in my life, with the best of my ability, not to be critical of folks, until I show love first. And then it's not criticism, because if you know I love you, then the things that I'm sharing with you, the things that we're talking about, are only for your good.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where we truly have to get to. Handling it is reflective of what Lynn just said. Okay, she says, what you think about you very well. What Lynn just said was knowing that you're on the right path. And I think that falls in line, Doc, with what you were saying, in that when you really know who you are, and I think that there's a clarity of direction, thought, and mindset, that criticism just does not have the same effect.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
We got to understand that, you know, criticism comes from the word critique, right? And so just because you critique someone doesn't mean it's going to make it right or make it wrong. Right. It's just an opinion on what you believe it is.
So why do we critique people?
Right.
Why do we do that?
This is, you know, folks gonna have an opinion regardless, and I think that's their way of showing you their opinion to critique you, right? So, but it doesn't matter if it doesn't mean that whatever they say, it doesn't mean it's gonna be right or wrong. It is their opinion of something. So you begin to internalize it.
And it's how it's done.
Yeah.
Right. Critique should be done in a way of encouragement. That's what I always say, encouragement, right? Our hearts, you know, our minds, the things that we went through, we have to check those things. So we've taken critique and turned it into a bad thing. Like we're not encouraging you to be better. We're tearing you down to feel better. And that is one of the things that we have to really analyze anytime we're listening to people. Like if you're walking in your purpose, you understand where you're going, right? It's like standing in a lion's den. You're in the lion's den, and these lions are around. You can be completely safe in where you are if you know who you are, whose you are. Most of us don't know that.
Yeah. Well, you know, he said, Jesus told Peter, he said, the enemy desires to sift you as wheat.
Right.
He said, but I prayed in your stead that your faith fail you not. And then here's what the next verse says. And when you be lifted up, reach back and strengthen the brother. It has everything to do with where you are and where you're going. It's not done until you have anybody. Now, I can't reach back and strengthen you if I'm critical. I can't reach back and strengthen you if I'm judgmental. I can't reach back and strengthen you unless I am fully persuaded who I am. Appreciate the process and the things that I've gone through. And then turn around and say, you know what? I got you.
And accept it.
Exactly. And everything is, and know that every part of that has made me who I am today. That becomes the key. So is criticism something that can be healthy?
For me, I just take that twofold purposes. For me, it's like I can't really control what you say or critique about me, but I can control how I'm going to respond to what you say or do about it. You know what I mean? So it's I think we have some of that own personal to do with whatever the situation is as well. If I take it into a negative, it could be negative. But I can take whatever you say and I can make it positive. You say do positive just because. So it doesn't matter really what you say to me. It depends on how I interpret what you say. That's going to make it relevant in my life.
Now,
you know what I mean?
We say that it can happen. It should happen. But why doesn't it happen for so many people? Why is it so hard for folks?
Because they already think it's so. I think it's because they already think it's so. You know, I think if you say something negative, you know, I got my beard, you know, I'm trying to let this thing grow up. But you say, man, I don't like your stuff, you looking kind of scruffy. If I already thought that I'm walking up the house looking scruffy, as soon as you say it, that thing gonna resonate in my spirit. Like, dang, I am looking kind of scruffy in it. Why? it didn't make it so, because I still walked out of the house with the same bed. It was still the same thing. But because what you just said to me resonated within my spirit, because I thought that very same thing, now it becomes critical for me.
So are we back to, as a man thinking in his heart? So is it? Are we
Absolutely.
back to whatever you think about you? So truthfully, is criticism self-imposed? Is the criticism you get from someone else an extension or a projection of what you really feel about yourself?
Well, self-critical is taught.
Right.
Being self-critical is definitely environmental. There's no way we came out the womb and all of a sudden we say, you know what, I don't like my fakeness. It's something that was placed inside of us. Is it a powerful tool? Absolutely. I think it's a powerful tool because all growth begins with questioning. All growth begins between somebody pours into you. Are the right people pouring into you? That's good. Right.
And so the question is, so let's take it a step further. The people that are pouring in, how do we know if they're right or wrong? Because we've accepted that certain people with certain status, certain titles, certain space in our lives are going to tell us the stuff we need. So how do we know? How does the individual know if it's positive, constructive criticism, if it's negative, demeaning critique? Because of the way we're subjected to rules, authority, roles, all those things. How do we get to that place? Because again, handling that has everything to do with our perception of where it's coming from. So what does it take for us to get to a place where we can hear it from those places, and only apply what needs to be applied? What does it take for us to get there?
I think it goes back to Doc when he was talking about earlier, certain folks that you get around and they just always have that little critical spirit, right? You know, you get around certain folks and then everything that you do becomes judgmental for them. You know, you tell them about a problem, all of a sudden they want to psychoanalyze who you are as an individual. You're like, man, I had I went and got me some coffee today, man, and the coffee was hot. Well, what's going on in you that you get hot, that you get the wrong coffee, And I'm like, wait a minute, I just told you that I just got the wrong, you know what I'm saying? All of a sudden they want to be critical of your life and so when you string a bunch of those together, after a while you begin to look at it like Doc said, it's like, wait a minute, this person's just a critical individual. It don't have anything to do with me because that person is that's just who they are.
So here's the deal. If that's the case, what do you do with those kind of people? Let's say they're in your family, they got your bloodline,
I don't talk to them.
they're close to you. How do you handle those people? If you love them through, how do you handle them?
Well, you have to love them through, right? But you have to disconnect your emotion.
Absolutely.
Disconnect your emotion from the person. If that makes sense. Like what comes out of their mouth is you see that they're spitting venom. You see that they're spitting poison. Disconnect your emotion. That's not a personal thing. It's a self thing. They're having a problem with themselves and they're fighting their own war.
Do you respond?
Oh, absolutely not. Right. You tell them how you feel. Absolutely not. I mean, many times I'll give people a blank stare.
Right.
I'm not receiving.
Right. Because at that point you're gonna stop. You can't talk to a person who's looking at you stupid. Right. Like, come on, let's get out of here.
So Dr. Gentry said the first key to rebuking criticism is the look at your stupid stare.
No, right. Let's look at you stupid, right? But let's address it. Let's go ahead and address it right? Because I have to call the spirit out. Right. Because I understand exactly what it is. Right. It's a spirit. Right. It has nothing to do with the person who they are. It has to do with the spirit inside of them. I love when I look at Paul. Paul in Romans tells you how to get he gives you 3 rules of taking advice from people. And the first rule is if it does not align with the word of God, do not take advice from that person. Right. So if what they're saying does not benefit you, if what they're saying isn't something to better you, first of all, stop taking advice from them. Stop listening to them. Their critique doesn't even matter in my mind. So give them the dumb stare. Start there, right? So after we give them the stupid stare, we're gonna address the very thing that they say, right? And call them out. Right? Because that's all it is. It's spirit.
Do you do that right away? Do you do that right away? Like when somebody coming negative at you, are you responding immediately to what they said, or you just giving them a stare and be like, okay, and keep it moving, and then you wait a couple times until they keep doing it, and that's when you respond.
I believe it's all things are addressed in their right time. Okay. Right. I can't. You say something crazy to me right now, I might not be on here. Right. You don't still get the dumb stare. Right. But we on, and I've had to do that. Right. Because quick personal story. You know my story, Coach. I went through a divorce. I lost everything. Right. So inside of the confidence that Adrian had always had, that was always made me through. I lost that confidence. So everything that people were saying to me was hypercritical. It wasn't. It was because it was the things that I've already been believe in myself. Right. So they became hypercritical. I internalized. Right. After a while, I realized the people who are the most. That's when I came up with the people who are the most critical, the most judgmental. They worse off emotionally than I am. Like they're dealing with more insecurities than I was dealing with. Right. So at that point, I had to go back. You know, I let it went on because that's how I felt. That's where my esteem was, my self-esteem was. But eventually, I had to go back and I say, hey, wait a minute. You know what I'm saying? XYZ, XYZ. No, bro. And that's what we all have to do. We have to release those people because we're going to hold on to the negativity that they poured in our spirit. Insecurity breeds insecurity. Anger breeds anger. Frustration breeds frustration. Love can only breed
love. That's right. And that, you know, and that's it's cool. It's really nice that you're saying those kinds of things because for Shimon, what is old news? Find new news. Your inner being, God's source, doesn't live in the old. And this should be. Thanks, Alana. That is, and we're having this discussion about this, but it is, Adrian. It's moving beyond it. It's finding some news, and that's what I'm trying to share with them on the show today in Houston. Is that there are? I was looking at statistics, and there's about 5,000 to 8,000 folks that consider themselves white supremacists. Right? There's 322 million people in the United States, so they represent 0.0000024% of the population. Now, don't get me wrong; those mindsets and ideologies seem to be more relevant and on the forefront today. But truthfully, I just gotta believe if the other 322,890,000 folk decided to just love all the way through, I'd venture to say that love would trump all this. Excuse the pun, because I didn't mean to say Trump. But the reality of it is, love would trump all this. And the reality of it is that would be the case. So when you look at it, look at this,
we got Miss Gray on. She says, does it line up with God, what God says about us? If it doesn't, then it's not true perspective of who we are. People who criticize from a place of hurt and insecurity.
And watch this. Here's why we don't know if it lines up with God. We don't know who we are in God. I think that's what we talked about earlier. If you know who you are, see the reason you don't know whether it lines up or not is because you have no idea of who you are in God. And I think that's a big piece of it. This criticism element, this whole thing of criticism, is a part of the process. But I think it's up to us to decide how much of it we want to entertain. And when we decide to not entertain it anymore, then, as Alana said, we got to move into something new and some new news. But what we do is we continue to stay stuck in this critical arena. And we talked about where it comes from. We are enamored in the world by critical thinking, having to have answers to everything. Well, if you have to have answers to everything, then you're not walking by faith, because faith is the substance of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. So critical thinking, the need to have an answer, is almost the opposite of walking by faith. And that's where we live. So again, when you look at this whole essence of where we are, criticism, critique, critical thinking is all in opposition to faith. And we're back to, again, the rudimentary issue here is faith versus fear. And that's what it comes down to. So how we handle that, we have to raise our level of faith and who we are and what we're about and who we're with, all those things. But I love what you said, Dr. Gentry, is how we deal with those people. And I've got kids, I got young folks around, and this is more relevant in them than I've ever seen. I've never seen a more critical group of people than the millennials. They got something to say about everything, and they feel like it's a justified right.
But they're bombarded with so much information all at one time. Back in the day, we didn't have that. You know what I'm saying? Now the information, the technology that's out there, they have the ability to get a quick like. You put something out there right now, you might get 1,000 likes or dislikes. You know, so they're in an environment that breeds that type of instant gratification, instant responses, instant commentary.
But we have to look at media. We have to look at what media plays. Media in our culture plays a major role in how people think. Right? The side chick is a good thing now. Right. It's the craziest thing in the world.
They got to have a show about it.
Right. The things that make top programs are the ones that have the most, let's say, ignorance. Right. Those become the most. Those become the top programs. I look at even. Well, let's go back to President Trump. You're fired. Apprentice. Right. And what they don't understand is he's an exception to the rule. Right. If you go back and look at Good to Great, you'll realize when they go back and look at 1,000 different great companies and their CEOs, it was completely different. You know, he was completely different. So the critical thinking is necessary in today's age. We've lost the ability to critical think because we look at everything from the surface. And until we begin to look at things a little bit deeper, utilize critical thinking to your benefit, not to talk you out of things.
And I think we've done the exact opposite. I think critical thinking takes us out of it instead of having us understand how to be in it.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so when we look at it, it's all of these are aspects. Let's see. That's so true in the disconnected humanity. Nothing seems to be real then. Okay, that's what it says. But anyway, Shimon been on it tonight. But I wanted to make sure that we talked about this because it held me back for a long time. And part of what I want to do with the show always is to discuss real stuff with real people. Discuss real stuff that they can go back and look at. Criticism was a challenge for me. Low self-esteem was a challenge for me. And people say, well, Grayson, how in the world did you have low self-esteem? How was that issue? You never looked like that. I would have never thought that. And I think there's a whole world of people out here
who cover it up.
That have covered it up because we were taught to fake it till you make it.
Absolutely.
And because we do that, we literally push it down deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper until it totally affects us at the root and the core. And no matter how much we fake it, we can totally never find our way out of it. So handling criticism, it's a necessity. It's something that you have to, if you want to become the person you want to become. If you want the life that God has for you, criticism is a part of it. If you want to wear your WWJD bracelet, you got to know that criticism is going to come with it. If you want to do good to people, criticism is going to come with it because somebody's going to think you have an agenda. So everything that you decide to do, understand that this is a part of it. And if you just accept it as a part of it, it's not a negative part of it. It's not a positive part of it. It's just a part of it. It's a part of it. It's the process. How you deal with it, how you respond, how you react to it will always be the end result of how it affects you. Absolutely. What's the toughest thing that you dealt with in your life when it came to criticism? For me, it was color. It was color. What was it for you?
It wasn't after my divorce. I really didn't understand insecurity until after my divorce. And it was attacking on my manhood. Finances wasn't there. I was trying to rebuild, and so it was a constant attack on my manhood.
Emasculation, baby.
So trying to overcome that. I mean, everything that they're saying is lining up with actually what's going on in my life. So that was one of the toughest things. I had to realize, wait a minute. Like I said, went back to the whole judgment thing. These people worse off than I am emotionally. Insecure. Nothing what they're saying is true. God built me to be a monster. God built me to be great. So after I realized that, I can't even think about what you said.
I was never enough until I learned that I already was. Toughest thing you dealt with.
I think the toughest thing, when the real estate market crashed, here I am as an African American, one of the top real estate agents on the site sales field, working with some of the major developers. And when that market crashed, I had to deal with the criticism of it was a fluke. The only reason you were successful was because the market was good. You know what I'm saying? That market started to crash and you wasn't able to produce the same results. So I had to deal with that internal message of, was it a fluke? Am I not really? You know what I'm saying? And then you hear those external saying the same thing. So that was a rough period.
So we fully know that we've all dealt with it, and I think that there's a world of people out there that have dealt with it or dealing with it every day. And the more we really begin to grow and move into the next place in our lives, this is always going to be a part of it. I think when we look at the enemy and how the enemy does want to deal with us or affect us, These are the things that he uses: poverty, criticism, ill health, old age. All those things are there. But he talks about criticism being the main one. And if you can get somebody suppressed emotionally, if you can get them mentally not connected with who they really are, if their birthright is not their default answer for everything that they do, then you're going to have the ability to separate them, take them down, and take them somewhere they want to go. This has been another Tuesday edition of the Real Difference Radio Show. I'm always here with Mr. Chris Allen, who's on the grind, but just want to thank Dr. Adrian Gentry for being here tonight and adding in, because it's again, it's a conversation, and we don't ask folks to believe what we're saying. What we do is we want you to listen, take it in, and see what it is that you can take from it to become a better you. As we end every show, we're going to end it with my group from Hazelhurst talking to you about living in faith.
God, I can do